Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fifth episode of A QISSAA with Ishika, quintessential and inspiring stories of South Asian artists. My name is Ishika Muchal, and I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, California, which I want to acknowledge is the land of the Tongva people. I am so excited to introduce to you my guest today, Behzad Dabu, an actor, writer, activist, and producer. Behzad has had an illustrious career on screen and on stage, from Los Angeles to Chicago to New York. You may have seen him on screen as Simon Drake in How to Get Away with Murder, as Amir on The Chi, as Azad on Disney's The Lion Guard, and on Chicago P.D. And this is just a small number of his multiple TV, film, and national commercial credits. He originated the role of Abe in the Pulitzer Prize-winning and Tony-nominated play Disgraced, which he performed at the American Theatre Company, Goodman Theatre, Berkeley Repertory, Seattle Repertory, and the Mock Paper Forum at Center Theatre Group. He also originated the role of Amit in Samsara at Victory Gardens Theatre, for which he was nominated for a Jeff Award for Best Actor. A member of SAG-AFTRA and Actors Equity Association, Behzad got his BFA in acting from Columbia College Chicago, where he also worked as a senior international admissions officer. Behzad is also a strong advocate for justice, equality, and representation, a founding member of the Chicago Inclusion Project, and a company member of the Timeline Theater Company. He's also an acting coach, an audience engagement facilitator, and post-show discussion leader. I am so honored to welcome Mr. Behzad Dabu.
Hi.
Hello, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm gonna start a little bit at the beginning because that seems like a good place to start.
Okay.
So how did you get into acting, and when did you know that this is what you want to do?
I was always a person who loved telling stories. I was always a person who, when I told a story, I didn't want to just tell it. I wanted to reenact it, and I wanted to tell it in a way that was really exciting. And I think that was the beginning of my parents recognizing that in me. And my parents put me in these really sort of early childhood community theater programs. So there was a program called Royal Fairy Tale Theater where a woman would recreate fairy tales for children to like perform. So I did some of those, and then went on to school plays. And it wasn't until I think I was like a sophomore or junior in high school where I was like, oh, I can do this. Like, I think this could be like, oh, if I could change some thoughts and lives and opinions with this. And then I decided to go to college for it, and the rest is history.
Wow. And so you mentioned how your parents were the ones who like started you in the classes. So were they supportive when you decided to pursue it as a career?
They were. It was really interesting. You know, I come from a obviously brown family, Iranian and Middle Eastern, Indian, Zoroastrian family. And normally that's not often the narrative of how parents are supportive, but my parents were incredibly supportive. Even though we came from sort of a lower middle class neighborhood to study at a liberal arts college in the arts, it all felt so opposite of what I'd always seen or heard. But my parents are creatives themselves, and they really, really believed in the work and the art and change and the power of art. And so they were incredibly supportive, and I couldn't be more grateful to them for that.
That's amazing. Yeah, I know stories of like parents not being so supportive, and I feel so lucky because my parents are, and
Yeah.
it just puts you, I get it just puts the people who don't get their family support into perspective when
Yes.
you have it.
Yes. You know, it's funny because I had a job where I used to go talk to students about how to study in the arts. And oftentimes I was talking to those parents. I was talking to the parents who were not supportive. And it was a chance for me to be like, hey, here's all the awesome things about this career, and how your support could really help your child. And a lot of times it opened up the parents' minds of even they didn't want to be non-supportive. They just have a sort of their own view of what is success.
Yeah,
And changing that really helped them support their children.
that's really nice to hear. And is this you're talking about your work as the senior international admissions officer?
Yes, that's right.
I was just going to ask about that. So, can you tell us like what that experience was like, traveling and connecting with these families?
Yeah, I traveled all throughout the U.S. and all throughout the world, connecting with families and helping them choose which arts college they were going to send their students to if they were, and how to do it, and sort of how to be prepped for studying the arts in the United States.
Mhm.
And that was for all artistic fields, from photography to film to theater to dance to music, whatever it was, all artistic fields. It was an amazing job. I got to travel the world. It really sort of sparked a desire for activism in me, kind of seeing the rest of the world, but it also sparked an understanding of cultures and an understanding of how informative travel can be to a person, how important travel is. But I got the opportunity of a lifetime. To literally travel the world and talk to these families and meet with artists from all around the world. It was an incredible job. Yeah.
Absolutely. That sounds like an incredible job.
Yeah.
Travel is such a great experience.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about the process of originating a role in theater like you did on Disgraced and Samsara?
Yeah, so I am an actor who loves new plays. A lot of actors don't love new plays, and a lot of actors often their skill set is not in new plays, but my skill set is really in new plays. It's funny, people would ask me, what is your dream role? And people would always name these incredible roles. It could be Hamlet or, something. My dream role has always been, I've always said, like, it hasn't even been written yet. My dream role will be written in 2028 and I'll do it in 2029 for the original production, So I love new plays. I love working with playwrights on dialogue and character and watching a new play grow. And I've been lucky enough to work on a few new plays that I think will be classics, like new plays that I think students in universities studying theater will study in the year 2050. I do think they'll be studying Disgraced. I do think they'll be studying Lauren Yee and Samsara. And so I feel honored and grateful to be a part of some of those new plays. But for me, the idea of doing a show on Tuesday night and then Wednesday being handed new pages and doing that show Wednesday night and then Thursday being handed new pages, doing that show Thursday night, for some people that sounds like a nightmare, but for me that's really exhilarating. I love the process of creating new work. And then also little things by saying, hey, I know what you're trying to say here, but there's 3 H's in this sentence and that's hard for actors to say. So can we change one of those words to this? Like even little things like that can help craft a script to really feel like you've done more than say words. You've really created a character from the page, from the being. And there's no rules because I haven't seen a YouTube video what somebody else did, or I haven't read a review of a performance somebody else did. We are crafting this ourselves, and it really makes you trust the other collaborators, your director, your writer, your performers, and vice versa. The writer has to trust the actors. The writer has to trust the performers and the director and the crew too. So it's a really collaborative process, and I love it.
That's amazing. Yeah, it sounds like you're so much a part of the play development process, not just the performance.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And speaking of Disgraced, which has multiple brown lead characters, which is a really rare thing for a play to have, you have been a bold advocate for representation in the arts. And so many South Asians like myself have struggled with the issue of the lack of representation on the page and the stage. So can you talk about what it felt like to play a character that was, well, you were part of the development process, but also a character that was written for someone who looked like you?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So, what's funny? I'll tell you a story, an anecdote that the Disgraced wasn't fully written when I auditioned. He had written a scene. And the scene he had written, my character wasn't even in. So I'm reading this scene and I'm reading about another brown lead character.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm reading about that character and I'm like, wow, this character is wealthy. This character has a beautiful home in New York. This character is about to be a partner of a law firm. This character is admired by his peers. This character is admired by people who don't look like him. This character has a $600 shirt on and a $4,000 suit on. And he's got, you know what I mean? And he's wow, I haven't seen a role like this in the American theater. I really hadn't. And so I wanted to be a part of it regardless, even though I hadn't seen my character. And look, it's still really hard representation for people who look like us, right? It's still not even close to even being in the realm of equitability. Not even a little bit. But doing a little bit at a time to get better is all we can do. Incremental change is better than no change, in my opinion. And so, yeah, Disgraced was a big part of that. And it's interesting because Disgraced is controversial. Disgraced has a lot of people who look like us who don't like the play, who hate the play. And that's fine because, in my opinion, representation isn't moved forward when we show completely rosy, perfect, prophesicized characters on stage. We want to be able to show characters with nuance and flaws, just like white characters have been shown for decades. They have flaws. They are nuanced. They have pros and cons, and I want our brown characters to see that too. So I actually welcome the critiques of that.
Absolutely. It's part of being human. It's part of being like the main character to have flaws, otherwise the character is kind of boring.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I started this series, is to address the issue of representation.
That's
And
great.
you also worked with, you helped found the Chicago Inclusion Project. So can you talk about what drove you to start that and what the goals of that were?
Yeah, I don't want to take credit where it's not due. The founding is really a woman named Mjoy Gavino. She is an amazing woman who was living in Chicago at the time, and she's an incredible actress. And we were all sort of talking, and there were so many town halls in Chicago happening about representation, and everybody was talking, and I'd always been an advocate. So it wasn't just her and I. There was a group of 6 people that got together to really sort of come together and create a resource for theaters, not only to call out the problems, but also call in and be a resource and a guide to help them.
Mm-hmm.
Chicago Inclusion Project's work has actually spread throughout the country. We've worked with lots of theaters, and I've been a part of advocating for equality and leadership change at multiple theaters. But I do want to make sure that the lion's share of the credit goes to Mjoy. Mjoy is the one who did the work and really took it from nothing to something. And so while I'm a founding member, she really spearheaded it. And it's great because we were a resource. Like, for example, when a theater company wants to do a play reading internally to decide whether they want to do it or not, we would come in there and cast an internal reading so they could see what it was like if, it's cast more inclusively. We've also partnered with theaters to help cast. So we partnered with Timeline Theater, for example, and helped cast their production of Sarah Rules in the Next Room or the Vibrator play. So we cast it inclusively, and we're also there to say, hey, we've tried to talk to this company about this thing, and they're not listening, and they continue to do this damaging work, and we're there to call them out, and we're also there to call them in and say, and when you're ready to change, come to us and we'll help you. So, Chicago Inclusion Project is really something I was proud to be a part of when I was in Chicago, more hands-on, and I'm proud to be a part of today, kind of to spread it to keep spreading the message, even on things like this with you.
Absolutely. That's so powerful that you help with the casting process, because I feel like so many theater companies where they're casting, they just don't even consider the fact that the cast could be equally good if it was diverse.
Exactly right. This idea that we're going to lose quality if we lose the thing is ridiculous. And not only is it ridiculous and harmful and damaging and propagating myths of supremacy, outside of that, it's factually incorrect. If you look at the box office numbers of movies like Judas and The Last Messiah, of Black Panther, of Moonlight, of things like that, and then you look at theater when we talk about things like Hamlet and Chicago when they cast diversely and things like that, Hamilton, when we do things like that, we see that like it's not even backed by the numbers. And so not only it's like when we see things cast homogeneously white, we're saying you're doing that in spite of the fact that it's not even good for your wallet, right? And so that's where it becomes even more of a push. But here's the thing: sometimes people don't know that. So Chicago Inclusion Project needs to be here to say, hey, did you know actually that it doesn't even help the wallet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. I was just part of a discussion yesterday, and we were actually talking about Black Panther, how that was one of like the highest grossing movies.
Yeah. Third.
Because people actually decided to give African Americans a stage.
Yeah, and imagine if like, and here's the other thing, right? So when we have two equal actors and they do a good job, and there's a white actor and then an actor of color, okay? Or how about this? A white actor and an actor in a wheelchair, or a white actor and a trans actor, or a white actor and a woman over 40. You know what I mean? Like whatever these sort of things are. And you have these two actors. Sometimes what they'll say is, well, this actor has, this actor has a resume that eclipses it. Well, why do they have a resume that eclipses it? Because of what's about to happen right now. You're about to give them this job because of the resume that they have. And guess what? The resume is going to get stronger, and this resume is going to stay where it is. And then this resume is going to get stronger and stronger. It's going to keep happening. So at a certain point, there has to be a say like, okay, actually, this role with this actor might be more interesting. We have to get rid of this idea of what's best. But what's more interesting, and sometimes authenticity is more interesting. Sometimes a background that we don't see often is more interesting. So now watch what happens. You give this actor the role, now they have that resume. So we look at Disgraced. All of a sudden, brown actors all over the country. So in the year 2014 and 15, Disgraced was the most produced play in America.
Wow.
So outside of Shakespeare. So Disgraced was the most produced play in America. So now you think about that. Let's say there were 20 or 30 professional productions of Disgraced in those years. That's 20 or 30 brown actors that got to play a lead in a way that they haven't before. So now they have that experience, they have that resume, they have that relationship with the theaters that they can continue to work there. So that's how this stuff spreads. So now we don't even, Disgraced goes beyond Disgraced. So now we have maybe that actor who played Amir in Disgraced, I'm making this up, in Minneapolis, maybe now he can go on to play Othello. Or Cyrano de Bergerac in their production, because we can see that they can hold leads. And so it goes beyond that. Representation matters because their resumes start to get even too.
Absolutely. And there's so much power in the creative team, in the casting team and the writing team to actually write those roles. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So like you've said, you've been involved in activism a lot, and a lot of our generation and just like our art and our life is based on social media. So how have you used that platform to assist with your art and activism?
Yeah, so look, social media I think is the least we can do, right? Because it's very easy. It's easy. It's easy to type and then like live your life. That being said, just because it's the least we can do and it's easy to do, I don't think that means that we shouldn't do it. I do think that there's power in somebody who's sitting at home and thinking, I don't know why people say Black Lives Matter. I mean, all lives matter, and I feel bad for the cops. Somebody might say that at home. And then they see their dentist says Black Lives Matter. And their favorite brand, Nike, says Black Lives Matter. And their cousin says Black Lives Matter. And the kid they went to school with says Black Lives Matter. And I think if enough people are saying Black Lives Matter on someone's Instagram feed, they might go, what? Really? My dentist? Really? My third grade teacher? And it might make them look. It might make them research. It might make them go further. So if enough of the messages hit you that make you go and research and see what it actually is, then I think that's great. So I do think there's a power in social media. But as people get a voice, as they become public figures, and I don't have a massive voice, but I have a little bit of a voice, and I want to take that voice and use it to the best of my ability. So if I have 500 followers, I would love 500 followers to see me say Black Lives Matter. And if I have 15,000 followers, I want 15,000 followers to see me say Black Lives Matter. And when I have 1.5 million followers, I want 1.5 million followers to see me say Black Lives Matter. And it goes beyond just Black Lives Matter, but it's a good example of, I think social media and your social media presence can really, if it just makes a message mainstream, that's important. I mean, one more thing to say on that. In 2012, Black Lives Matter actually had its first resurgence. And then in the pandemic in 2020, it had its sort of second resurgence. Mm-hmm. But in 2012, can you think of a brand that would have said Black Lives Matter on their commercials? In 2012, can you imagine the entire NBA putting Black Lives Matter in caps lock on their basketball court? Can you imagine the road on top of really right in front of the White House being named Black Lives Matter Way? I mean, can you imagine 2012? No. but it became so normal from 2012 to 2020 that all those things happened. That now, like, you can turn on a commercial and a big brand, an international brand, says Black Lives Matter, and it's on the White House, and it's on NBA basketball courts being streamed into 30 million homes across the world. And so that's proof. That's proof that messaging and social media has made something the norm. And when you make something the norm, it's more accepted.
Absolutely. It almost raises it to a level of accountability, because so many people are saying it that it must have some merit behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. For sure. And it's like, how can you be afraid to say it, theater company, when, Nike is saying it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what inspired your activism regarding law enforcement and accountability and the prison system? I've seen a lot of your work on social media about that.
Yeah, I've worked a lot with Reform LA jails, and I've worked a lot with. Okay, so it's interesting. It actually all started through media representation. So my channels of focus are primarily the prison system and media representation. You're right about that. Mm-hmm. So I grew up with no one looking like me on television, right? And so since no one looked like me on television, I had to then say, as we talked about, hey, I want to go study acting, even though no one looks like me on television, except for Apu, which is voiced by a white guy on The Simpsons, who's animated. So like, that's all we have, right? And so that kind of stuff I noticed permeates culture. Culture is the art, and then the art permeates into it. For example, my father is an architect. He has a master's from MIT. He's an incredibly successful architect. And when he went into the office in the 90s, the guys would call him Apu. They would call him Apu. Office. And I'm thinking to myself, like, yeah, it was the 90s. It wasn't offensive to do back then necessarily. It is offensive. But I'm like, you can't tell me that it's just a TV show. Because just a TV show made a guy who has a master's from MIT going into an office as an architect be called Apu. So it's not just a TV show. It's culture. And so you start to look at representation more and more and more. And you say, I'm going to tell you some true facts now, okay? This is all stated by the USC Annenberg study of media representation. But there were 2,200 leads on network television last year. 2,200 leads. 20 of them, so less than 1%, were Middle Eastern, North African, South Asian. 20 out of 2,200. And of those 20, 16 were seen as a threat. 16 were bad guys, quote unquote. So now I'm going to take that and I'm going to take that study and I'm going to put that here. And now let's have another study. And that other study says, this was 2018. Wow. So now let's put another study. Okay. So the other study is that most people in America don't know or have a friend outside of their race. So now we say most people in America don't have a friend outside of their race. And this other study of there's only 20 of us on television and 16 of us are threats. Mm-hmm. So if you don't know anybody outside your race, and then the only time you see us is on television and we're threats, of course you're going to want to have a Muslim ban. Of course you're going to want to say that brown people are terrorists. Of course you're going to want to say that Mexicans are rapists. Of course you're going to want to say that those black people are thugs. Of course you're going to want to say that those Latinx people are maids. Of course you're going to want to say all those things because that's what you see on television and you don't know any better. And so once you start to learn that, you start to learn that representation in the media is directly tied to what's happening. It's the same way that a black person's mugshot is them looking scary and a white person's mugshot is their like graduation photo. It is absolutely racist, and it absolutely, the media representation and what's happening in society is directly connected. So once I learned that, Black Lives Matter was a no-brainer for me to get involved in, and also South Asians for Black Lives and all sorts of things. And then you start to see how everything is tied. So to answer your question, why prisons? The minute you learn about it, I don't know how you can't not be directly involved. The minute I learned about it, I was like, what? So actually close to where you went to school, they had plans to build a $3 billion prison, which would be the largest prison in America, a men's and women's prison, with taxpayer money, without a taxpayer vote. So without a taxpayer vote, with taxpayer money, build a $3 billion prison to be the largest prison system. And then you start to learn more, and you start to learn, whoa, so 52% of these people would literally be in there for things that a mental health institution could take care of. Most people would be in there because of cash bonds. So it would be people who haven't even been convicted of a crime but just can't pay bail because we have a terrible cash bail system. So there's all these things that are tied, and you think this is all made to disproportionately affect people of color and lower income communities in a way to enrich politicians and funders of private prison systems. It's so unbelievably corrupt that when you learn about it, you can't possibly not be active about it if you have an empathetic bone in your body. And so that's what got me into it. I learned about it. I just learned about it, and I was like, whoa, this can't happen. And I will say, we were successful. The Reform LA Jails movement stopped that prison from being built. We got enough signatures to make it be so the first thing they did was, by the leadership of Patrisse Cullors and Megan Dobkin and Reform LA Jails and Melina Abdullah and many others, Kendrick Sampson, Matt McGorry, they got enough signatures for the prison decision to be put on the ballot. That was step one. And then step two was got enough votes to vote it down. So the prison will not be being built. Yeah.
Do not want something like that so close to my school, and just like in general to exist.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you were saying, it's a business to capitalize off of BIPOC and low income families.
100%.
Well, yeah. Well, anyone who is watching right now, I'm in conversation with Behzad Dabu, who, if you've heard until now, is incredible. And make sure to like and subscribe my YouTube channel. And let's get back. So you were talking about CalArts, which is a great segue, because I have a question about that. You had, I had the pleasure of meeting you in person before this whole thing, when you had visited and done like a lecture there. And you had shared this story that is so iconic that I remember about like how you got your SAG card and how you booked your like first commercial. Can you share that? It's just, I just want to hear it again.
Yeah, so that is a funny story. So I had auditioned for, it's funny, we talk about getting our union cards, and we often think it's going to be on this like amazing project. And I had done a lot of amazing projects in my life, but my union card actually came from a McDonald's commercial, a chicken nuggets commercial, and a chicken McNuggets commercial. Sorry, McDonald's will be upset. I had auditioned on a Friday, and on Saturday at like 10 in the morning, I was told that I was like a final choice. And then at Saturday at like 1 p.m., I was told it wasn't me. They went with the other guy. And I was like, all right, so whatever. And then on Monday morning at like, I think it was like 9 in the morning, my agent called and was like, put on a hoodie and get in a cab and get downtown now. And I was basically told that, get downtown and get there before the other guy who booked it. Because what happened is he was late and they didn't have time. They had booked a booth and they needed to go. And they couldn't find him. And so they were like, whoever actor gets here, we're going to go with. And so I ran downtown. It was one of those buildings with like 14 elevators in Chicago, like a 100-story building. And you got to find the elevator because only this elevator, certain floors, blah, blah, blah. I get in my elevator, I run, I'm out of breath. And they're like, which one are you? And I was like, that means I'm first. So I was like, I'm Behzad, boom, 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 boom. And they spent all this time apologizing to me. We really did like you. We liked your tape. We just thought, I was like, it doesn't matter. Let's go. Let's get me in. Let's get me in. And that's how I got my SAG card and my first corporate gig.
That is iconic.
Somebody slept through their McDonald's national commercial.
You snooze, you lose.
It's true. The most perfect use of that phrase.
Yeah. So now that we've kind of transitioned from the stage to the screen, can you talk about some of the differences that you've experienced between like the process and acting and just like the vibe of
I had a lot of misconceptions about screen when I was a stage actor. I think a lot of stage actors, we have and rightfully so, we have a purity about the stage, right? We have a sacredness about the stage, and we believe that we are great actors, which we are. But I think sometimes that turns into us like putting our nose up at television actors as like they're not as good because they get to do it over and over and over and over again. And I'm like, well, there's also a skill in repeatability and how can we do things over and over and over again. So I have learned to respect the on-screen craft as much as I have respected the stage craft. I love the stage. I feel at home on the stage. I miss the stage every day. The best and most rewarding moments of my career have been on stage, without a doubt, 100%. But I've learned to respect the craft of the screen. And I think the mistake when people think about the differences is sometimes people say smaller, right? That like on stage you can be here and then on screen you got to be here. You know, this idea that it's smaller. And I think that's incorrect. I think it's focused. I think it's a level of focus. And so I think that on stage it's a level of like energy can come out of your face, whereas on screen I think energy has to come out of your eyes. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I think it's a level of focus. And I think that is something that I feel is the difference. Is the same intensity, but where are we focusing the energy?
Mm-hmm. And I was listening to one of your interviews, and you were talking about how on how to get away with murder, which we'll get into. Yeah. Don't worry, I've been to that show. I'm not leaving that out. Okay. But you were talking about how you got the script pages like practically right before you guys filmed. What was that like?
Most television shows work like that. You know, it'll be like, it's actually very similar to me of a new play workshop though. Mm-hmm. It's very similar to you have a show at 8:00 and a playwright is like, hey, I rewrote scene 3 at 5:30. Here you go. And you're like on your way to dinner and you're like learning a new scene 3. And then you're going to get back at 6:30. You're going to run it through a couple times. You're going to get ready and you still have the first couple scenes to do. And then you're just going to do it. So like, it's very similar to that. Both processes are so collaborative and everybody is there to support, the final product. So yeah, they're like, here's a writer who's like, boom. And you're like, boom, 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 boom. So I think in those moments you rely on your technique. What are the events of the scene? What does my character want? What's standing in my character's way? What are the tactics to get around those obstacles? If I always know clearly what's my objective, what's my obstacle, what are my tactics, I can't be steered wrong. I can then learn the words, which again is technique. There's memorization techniques. If you can rely on your technique and rely on your craft, I think you're 90% of the way there. And that last 10% is instinct and looseness and spontaneity and being open and listening and relying on your other actors. And I think it all kind of comes together in a way. And trusting that, like, hey, if I mess up, the editor's got my back. If I mess up, this person's got my back. That it's such a collaborative process.
Yeah. Wow. So let's like officially talk about How to Get Away with Murder. Okay. Not literally, of course. This is a family-friendly show. Okay. But your character, Simon Drake, is one that, at least to start, people love to hate. Mm-hmm. So how does playing a character like that impact you in real life? Whether that be like getting into character or how people like interact with you and talk to you about your character? How did that impact you?
It does impact you. People either lie or they tell the truth, and either way is like upsetting in one way. Because sometimes people are like, "Oh my God, I loved your character," and I'm like, "You're a liar. You didn't love my character. He was a horribly annoying pest rat of a character. You did not love him, so now you're lying." And then the other thing is where people be mean. Like people would literally come up to me and be like, "Hey, Connor and Oliver have been through a lot, so it's really fucked up what you're doing to them." And I'm like, whoa, like Connor and Oliver aren't real. I'm not real. That's not real. Their relationship isn't real. Why are you so upset? This is fake. You know what I mean? So that would happen too. And then what really is interesting, I've noticed on social media again, is that when characters are loved, they get a lot of positive response. But when characters are disliked, like my character was, they get a lot of like negative feedback about the actor. So stuff would get really personal. You know what I mean? And sometimes like when people on social media will talk about your looks or they'll talk about a thing, they're not talking about a character, they're talking about you. Yeah. Like they're talking about you. And so it was my first lesson in how to sort of ignore the mud or not play in the mud because there was a lot of that. However, what's fun about playing a character that's sort of disliked is you have to justify it. And I found a real good justification for it. And I believe this with all my heart. If people out there in the world were in the world of How to Get Away with Murder, you would want to be closer to Simon Drake than you would them. They are murderers. Yeah. You have to stop murder from happening.
I know.
He's upset because he works really hard, and yet the 5 people who are never in class are constantly with the professor, buddy. He's upset about that. I think
People.
if you were all in the world of How to Get Murdered, you would be more feeling on the Simon Drake side than you would on their side, I think.
Definitely. And I mean, I watched the show, and I'm gonna be honest, like in the beginning, I was like, okay, his character is a jerk. But then like you sympathize with your character when you learn your backstory. So I guess it goes to show that you can't judge any person or character. And that's so sad that the attacks get personal.
Oh, they do. Yeah, for sure.
It's a character.
Yeah, it's okay.
Wow. That's a lot to take in. But so you've gone from the stage to the screen, and you recently signed with the prestigious A3 Artists Agency, which is huge. So what have some of your struggles been along the way, and what was your favorite part?
My favorite what?
Your favorite part of like your journey so far?
There's been a lot of struggles, let me tell you. There's been a lot of struggles. This comparison is the thief of joy in this industry. And people can look at comparison, and when they do it, they're looking at everybody's shiny spots. And people have done it to me. They've been like, well, how can you're starting Chicago Inclusion Project, but you work all the time. And it's like, oh, so you actually you just didn't see all the roles I didn't get or all the comments I did have to do, you know what I mean? And then even now, like, oh, well, you're doing this, oh, you're with this agency, so this. And it's like, no, but you're not seeing the struggle, right? And so there's a lot of struggle. There's a lot of struggle. And this industry, this world is filled with ups and downs and struggle. And that turns into, hey, you originated a part and you're not going to do it at the biggest stage. That turns into, hey, this is your friend and they're not going to be able to work with you. Or, hey, this is, somebody you look up to and admire, and then you met them and they were horrible to you. Or, hey, there's so many things that happen that we deal with and we bury, and so other people don't see it. And that's why comparison is the thief of joy, because you're comparing your whole life to somebody else's highlights. Mm-hmm. And someone's highlight reel is not everything. And so it's tough. And even like the agency thing, A3 Artists Agency is a fantastic agency, and I love them, and I'm happy to be with them right now. But I've been with other prestigious agencies in the past, and I've also been in other agencies where it wasn't the best. And there's so much of this, and I have to just trust. There's a phrase I like to believe is that you can't let the high winds get to your head, and you can't let the low lows get to your heart, right? So don't get a loss get to your heart, and don't let a win get to your head. And you can constantly stay humble, but also constantly stay motivated and going, because that's kind of the only thing we have. Yeah. And I often think about when something really, when I don't get a part for the 50th time in a row, or I make my 60th self-tape and then hear nothing, or whatever it is, or I do my 30th pitch for something I've written and when once again told it's not going to happen because it features brown people, or whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. I have to say, am I going to quit? No. So then there's just nothing else to do but to move forward. All we can do is move forward. All we can do is the best we can, because if we're doing the best we can literally do no more than the best we can.
Yeah. And so what are some of the factors that you consider when you started acting for roles versus now when you select them?
I always think about 3 things when I'm selecting roles. It's called the 3 Ps that my mentor, Jeff Ginsburg, taught to me. We have people, pay, and play. And that's a triangle, and it's an equal triangle. Sorry, let me do this. It's an equal triangle, okay? And so it's people, pay, and play. And if you have 2 of those things, you're going to have a good time in it. And if you have 3 of those things, it's a dream role. Mm-hmm. If you have 1 of those things, you probably won't be happy. So let's take this for example. You are going to play your dream role, Hamlet, with awesome people, and you're going to get compensated well. That's going to be great. What if it's only 2 things, though? You're going to play Hamlet with awesome people, but the pay's not good? That still might be worth it, because you're going to get to play your dream role with amazing people. Or you're going to play Hamlet, you don't really love the director, but you're going to get paid really well, all right, that still might be worth it. You know what I mean? And so I always think I want to have 2 out of the 3 between people, pay, and play. And then you can take this and put this in relationships. You can put this in friendships and everything. And instead of pay, you think, what am I receiving out of it? People, who am I surrounding myself with? And play, what is the thing? What is the play that we're creating? What's the thing we're creating together? What am I receiving out of it? And who am I surrounding myself with? If you get 2 out of the 3, you're going to be happy.
That's really good advice. Wow. And was that the same when you were starting out? Like, did you have that much, I don't know what the right word is, but like leverage when selecting roles, or?
No. And I still don't, it depends, right? The leverage is, again, it's constantly shifting. So there are roles I took early in my career that I regret, that I would never take now. But at the same time, there are roles I have to take now that I might not take in 10 years, right? And we have to constantly know there's a shifting scale of what we can and can't do. And it also depends on the medium. What I can refuse or not refuse in the theater world is different than what I can refuse or not refuse in Hollywood, right? And it's, again, it all comes down to what we have and where we're at. And it's an individual thing, you know? I might be a person that thinks this thing is something I don't want to do, but there's another person that might think this is a thing I'm really wanting to do. Do you know what I mean? And it's an individual thing. Yeah. So in the beginning, no, I didn't have that, but I still thought about people pay and play. I still thought about it and was like, all right, so maybe these people are, you know, it's funny when we think about the people aspect of that triangle. I love to think about networking horizontally and not networking vertically. Networking vertically is, I'm going to reach out to this famous person or this awesome person or this awesome person or this person that's the head of this studio or this person that's like this famous actor. Like, that's networking vertically. But sometimes you network vertically so much that we forget to network horizontally. And networking horizontally is with your peers, the people at your level, right? And so it's like, oh, my friend I went to college with, or this person that's also a guest star in the same show that I'm a guest star on, or I'm working background and this person's working background. Let's network here, because guess what? If you network horizontally and create real relationships, then this person over here goes up and they can bring you with them. This person over here comes up, the whole wave rides together. So many people have tried to network vertically and they're reaching up, hoping that someone will drag them along. But in reality, when we network horizontally, we're creating real bonds that we can all come up together, because the person next to you in 10 years is the head of that studio, is the celebrity actor, is the whatever that you've created a real bond with.
Yeah. Wow. I've never thought about that. It's like lifting everyone up at the same time.
Yeah.
So you've worked in LA, Chicago, and New York. Is there a certain place that you've felt the most connected?
Tracy Letts, the acclaimed actor and playwright, has a really great quote that I love about this. He says, Chicago, when it comes to theater, he says, Chicago is the cake, New York is the frosting, and then LA is the sprinkles. And I really think that's true when it comes to the theater world. I really relate to that, is that some of the greatest work, the raw, gritty sort of pound for pound work in America comes from Chicago and the Chicago theater scene. And then it often goes to New York and gets a Broadway treatment. And then that Broadway treatment success comes to LA and they get a movie. And that movie is like dotted with sprinkle stars. And so I really think that that's true. I love the Chicago sense of ensemble. I love the Chicago sense of work ethic. And I love that in Chicago, being on time, being kind, being talented, and being good is often rewarded. I like that. And then LA, that's not necessarily true, right? Those things aren't necessarily rewarded. But what I love about LA is that LA provides work that gives you the ability to really reach the masses. LA is the place that allows you to do work that allows you to reach millions and billions of people, right? And Chicago doesn't provide that. And so there are pros and cons. In Chicago, you can impact your community, which is valuable. In LA, you can impact the country, which is valuable. And I'm going to be honest with you, I actually don't have a lot of New York experience. I'm from upstate New York and I've done some work there, but I actually don't feel confident to speak on New York because I haven't had a significant New York experience.
For sure.
Yeah.
Wow. Um, if this is a difficult question that I keep on asking myself this year, but
Okay.
I'm going to ask you,
Sure.
if you were not an actor, what career would you pursue? And are you working outside of acting as well?
I'd be a teacher. I really, really, really love teaching. I really, really love what I call like sending the elevator down or like passing some knowledge down. There's so much that I have learned from people above me, right? That have taught me, that have taught me, that have taught me, that have taught me, and I love taking that and passing it down. And then the flip side of that, there's so much negative that I've dealt with that I want to make sure people below me can avoid. So I want to
Mhm.
simultaneously like push away the negative and like pass down, filter down the good. And so I am currently the director of acting for Lena Waite's Hillman Grad Mentorship Program, and I'm really loving doing that. I'm loving working with those mentees. I do coach people on auditions because that gives me that sort of sense of teaching. But my favorite thing is that I love watching people book. I love watching somebody I coached literally get better on an audition and then go in and nail it.
Mhm.
I love seeing the improvement of the people we work with, right? I love that it gives me the joy of booking it myself. So I think I'd be a happy college professor of acting or teaching something. I also one day wouldn't rule out being like an artistic director of an institution or
Mhm.
directing theater or things like that. These are some of the things that I'm really interested in.
Wow. So other than that, what are you working on currently and how have you adapted to the pandemic's changes?
I'm working on creating content. So I'm working on creating one of the first the first family drama featuring South Asian characters. So I'm working on creating that. It's a 1 hour drama. I have a production company, so we're hoping to get it to. I'm signed with a production company, so I'm hoping to get it to the next level to get to a distributor so that we can all see it. Like we said, talking about LA, we can get it to a massive audience. So I'm trying to create that. I've been working on that for a few years. But what the pandemic has offered is time. And with that time, I was able to write it and able to really perfect it as much as possible and really get feedback on it and dwell over it and obsess over it and work with my mentor on it. And doing that stuff has been great in the pandemic. That's the one of the silver linings of the pandemic. And so working on getting that made is a Sisyphusian task. If Sisyphus was the guy who constantly had to roll the boulder up the mountain and then it would roll down. He would roll the boulder up the mountain and then it would roll down. And man, it really feels like that, right? It really feels like I get close to something and then it would roll down, and that's Hollywood, and that's being brown in Hollywood, and that's creating content in Hollywood, and that's all of that. And so I'm gonna keep rolling that ball up the mountain though. So that's what we're doing.
Absolutely. And I think what you said about writing your own stories is really powerful. And kind of building on that, do you have any advice for youngs, or not young necessarily, but any South Asian who is interested in pursuing the arts and acting specifically?
Yeah, you don't have to erase yourself. In fact, if you erase yourself, you're actually hurting your performance because you come across as a blank mask. You
Mhm.
are filled with so much depth that instead of erasing yourself, mold yourself into the character using your culture and your skills and your tools and your look and your voice and everything, because that's more interesting. So
Mhm.
we erase ourselves to perform in the narrative of what you think this colonial structure is, you're boring. And when you bring your essence to the role, you're interesting. And so don't erase yourself because you're removing your all your interesting parts. And can I tell you something? You will never be as good at that than they are. So when you erase yourself to become this thing, you're not as good as they are because that's their authentic thing.
Mhm.
So be your authentic self because authenticity is more interesting than anything.
I'm writing that down. Authenticity is more interesting than living.
I should write it down too. Sell it on a T-shirt. Enterprise.
So the show is called A Qissa with Ishika, and so qissa means episode. So can you tell us one qissa or episode from your life that has been really influential for you in anything?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's been a lot of influential episodes. I think that Disgraced brought me a lot of success, and it brought me a lot of rejection. There was a lot of rejection with Disgraced. And there were productions of Disgraced I really, really, really wanted to do and didn't get a chance to do it. And I didn't get a chance to do it in ways that were like particularly, I don't want to say hurtful, but particularly like they stung. They stung hard. But in those moments that I didn't do those productions of Disgraced, I traveled the world for one of them. Gave me the opportunity to do that. In the other one, I did Samsara, Lauren Yee's Samsara, which is the most fun I've ever had on stage, without a doubt, my favorite part I've ever played. So the lesson looking back is not doing those productions provided some of the most valuable experiences of my life as well. It really is that phrase of like one door closes, another one opens. But like when that door closed, it forced me, again, I'm going to move on. I'm not going to quit. So when I moved on to these other things, I actually can't imagine my life without having done those experiences. And those experiences have been maybe more formidable than doing Disgraced would have been for those productions. So I look back on that often and I think, okay, now that we're in 2021, there's this thing I really want and I didn't get it. So what is going to be the travel the world? What is going to be doing Samsara? What is going to be the other thing that in 5 years I'm going to go, wow, that was actually more influential than this thing that I thought I really wanted. And I look back now and I go, wow, there are things I really wanted in 2018 that I don't even remember now. And I really wanted it. So it's a constant reminder that, you know, what's for you is for you. There'll be something, there's always something that you can, it's how you deal with what's happening. And it's not having what you want, but wanting what you have. And that's all a constant reminder for me.
Absolutely. I mean, everything happens for a reason, I guess. That's what my mom always tells me whenever I get rejected from something.
My mom's saying it. Everything happens for a reason.
Literally. So other than Netflix, of course, where can people find your work?
All over. All over the place. Social media is the best way to find me. I'm at Behzad Dabu on everything, and that's BEHZAD DABU, and I'm on that for IMDb and Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all of that. But I constantly will post things, and hopefully we see the show that we're creating to give awesome roles for about 20 plus people of color on a major streaming platform soon.
Amazing. I cannot wait because I'm just thirsty for roles where I can see people like me.
Me too.
Yeah. So I just want to thank you so much for sharing your time and your story. And really, I honestly learned so much just speaking to you, and the lessons that you gave. You would be a great teacher. And I hope that our viewers as well enjoyed this really informative session and that this can serve as an inspiration to them. So thank you so much again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Seriously, thank you.
Of course. And to anyone watching, stay tuned for the next episode of A Qissa with Ishika on Sunday, April 25th at noon Pacific time. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and share this with any of your friends and family, especially those in the arts. Give them a little boost. In the meantime, stay safe, wear a mask, and take care. This is Ishika Muchal signing off.